All right, guys. Today we're going to add another pretty exciting feature to our game. This is going to be a timer. Now, to add the timer, we're going to have to make some code that does some of the same things that other codes, other parts of your code do already. In order to do that and do it well, we are going to have to make sure that we pair out some of the code that we've written before. So duplicated code, or code that does the same thing in a game, can be a problem. So we want to make sure that as much as possible we reduce duplicated code. So we get code that's doing the same thing, and we take some of that out so that we only have one instance of code that's doing the thing that we want it to do. If we're taking care of our code, make sure our code's efficient and that we don't have duplicated code, our program is going to run better. We're going to have fewer glitches, all those kinds of things. We can take care of by making sure that we don't have duplicated code. So before we really dive in, important concept to make sure that we're cleaning up duplicated code. So I just finished making my scoreboard in my game. So you can see I'm right here in my variables blocks, which is okay because the thing we're going to add for our timer is also going to be a variable. So I'm going to click on the Make a Variable button. So again, I'm in my player code, but that won't matter right this second. Let's go ahead and click on our player sprite. So we're in our player code, and then click on the variables button. That's the second from the bottom, the orange or the dark orange blocks. If I click on make a variable, this screen should pop up, and that tells us we're ready to make a variable. And I'm going to name this one timer. Seems to make sense since it's timer. I can make this for all sprites. I can make it for only this sprite. Either of those is fine. It's not going to make a big difference. I'll just leave it at for all sprites because that will give me the ability to use it in other sprites if I wanted to. I'm going to click the OK button, and now you can see my timer sprite is going to show up. Right now, the timer sprite is showing up in the upper left corner. I'm going to click and move my timer sprite to the bottom right corner. That's where I want my timer, but you should put your timer where you want your timer to show up. Kids these days. Once I've got my timer variable in here, I can start thinking about what it is that I want to do. Now, the basic concept is I want my timer to start when I get to the maze screen, and I want my timer to end when my player sprite reaches my goal sprite. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new event, and this is an event that we've already got. So we are going to create some parallel code, right? So we're going to have two events, both triggered on our maze game, okay? That's not the end of the world. That's really not even a big deal, but it is what we're going to do. So when we get to our maze game, we're going to make sure that our timer starts. What we're going to do next is we're going to go to our control blocks. And in our control blocks, we're going to bring in a conditional loop. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 blocks down, we've got a repeat until loop. And you may have to scroll down to get to it. It's right under the wait until block and right above the stop all block. So if we drag in a repeat until block, it's like an if then statement and a loop together in some ways, right? So we're looking for something to happen, and we're going to keep doing something until that thing happens. And what is it that we're going to look for to happen? Well, we're going to look for our player sprite to touch our goal sprite. So I'm going to go into sensing. I'm going to bring in a touching block. I'm going to change touching from mouse pointer to my goal sprite. So I'm going to repeat this loop until my player sprite touches my goal sprite. And what is it that I want to repeat? Well, basically, if you think about it, what I want to do is I want to change my variable over and over again every time something happens. And the thing that happens is in control as well. So I'm going to go to my control blocks, and I'm bringing in a wait 1 second block. Now we can make our timer count by seconds, but if we make it count by seconds, each count, like we could be between counts when we actually finish. So that could be a problem. So we're going to make it count instead by tenths of a second. So I'm going to change from 1 second to 0.1 second. So we're going to wait 0.1 seconds. And every time we wait 0.1 seconds, we're also going to change our variable. So go to variables, and we're going to bring in a change variable button. Now right now it's set on mistakes. It would be a mistake if I left that as a mistake. I'm going to change that to timer, and I'm going to change the amount of time from 1 second to 0.1 seconds. So every 0.1 seconds, we're going to count 0.1. In this case, seconds, right? So we're going to wait 0.1 and then count 0.1. Wait 0.1, count 0.1. And we're going to keep doing that until we reach the goal sprite. Now, here's where we've got to deal with our duplicated code. So if you look down here, we've got this code here that's touching goal sprite. So I'm going to drag that out because we don't want two events that are both triggering on the same thing happening. So if I leave this if touching goal sprite, switch backdrop to, then this could happen before the timer stops, meaning my timer would keep going, or the timer could happen before this happens, meaning I stay stuck on my maze screen. So those are two glitches that can happen because I've got this duplicated code. Simplest thing to do is to take this if-then statement and we'll trash it. But first, I'm going to bring this switch backdrop out, put the switch backdrop underneath my conditional loop. So then when I get to the goal sprite, my timer is going to stop, and then I'm going to switch to the finish screen. Right? I can even do more. I can take this whole when backdrop switches to finish, drag the hide, put it underneath that switch backdrop, and then trash can this event. And again, I'm streamlining my code, making my code more efficient, taking out elements that are duplicated and making sure they're not there. Now, if you're one of those kids that doesn't want your timer to show up on your start screen, and those kids are out there, you can bring in a hide variable here when we switch to start and make sure that variable says timer. And then we'll want to make sure that we show variable when we switch to our start screen, and that's the timer. And we can put that, when we switch to our maze screen. We can put that on the maze, this event that has all of our other stuff, or we can put it right down here on our timer block right there. It's not going to matter. Either way, that parallel code should run in parallel. So if I flag this, you can see I've got no timer here. If I click start, you can see my timer is counting. So I can see how quickly I can get through this game. And you can see my timer stopped when I got to to that goal sprite, which is great. You can see when I go back, and this is a good thing for us to notice. No, my timer started at 3, so that doesn't make sense. I made a mistake, right? So let's click stop and think about what we did. We never in our game reset our timer to 0. So you can see here we've got hide our variable and then set our variable. Let's bring in a set variable here for timer, and we'll make sure we set our timer to 0 when we switch to that start backdrop. That way, we'll always make sure that we go back to 0 for our timer. So there's start. We had a timer started at 0. Let's make sure it works. Get through my maze. Beat my... Oh, something bad happened here. Let's try that again. Something's going wrong. Something's going wrong. Switch to finish. Switch to finish. This is trouble for Emerson, too. I got to figure out what's going on. Set, switch backdrop, show variable, change, switch backdrop. Nothing telling me this shouldn't work. That's wild. So my timer did work, and I got back here, and there we are. Let's play it again and see if I can get that glitch to happen again. All right, so let's look. So my timer's back to 0. If you were as terrified as I was there, and I am still terrified. So because I'm resetting to So the fact that I'm resetting to my to that maze screen indicates the thing that should make some sense to some of you. And let me just stop here. So if you look, this red in my goal sprite is the same red as my wall. So to fix that glitch from happening, I'm going to need to change one of those colors. But as long as you don't have that same thing happening, your timer your timer should now be functioning based on the code that we wrote here in this video. So hopefully that worked. You didn't run into glitches like I did, but we're in pretty good shape here with our timer and our scoreboard at this point. So good job. Can't wait to see your games.